Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to react to the long list for the Booker Prize for 2022. It's Booker Prize season. I'm really excited about that. If you know me, you know the Pulitzer is my main thing, but I do really enjoy following along with the Booker Prize. I didn't do a predictions video. The only thing I said was that I will be surprised if Young Mungo does not make the list. Well, that turned out to be the case. And yes, I am surprised. I have a whole video review of Young Mungo. I'll link it down below if you're interested in it. And if you've seen that or followed since, you know I liked Young Mungo, but I didn't love it. Not anywhere near as much as Shuggy Bane, which really punched me in the feels. It pretty perfectly matched up with some of my own emotional baggage. So there was a bit of a dip for me. I liked parts of it, didn't like other parts. I would not have been upset if Young Mungo had made the list, but I don't really feel like I miss it because overall this seems like a good list and I'm glad that there was room made for some other books instead. Before we really get into the list, I'll talk about the other two big omissions. One of them I didn't think was actually going to make it. It's the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. And part of the reason for that is that it just feels like this has been overlooked by a lot of major literary prizes for the last year. As such, I can't really say I'm surprised it didn't make the list. I will say I am disappointed though, because this was probably the last chance love songs had to make it onto a major prizes long list. And it made it on the long list for the National Book Award. Did not make the short list. I just, wanted better for this book. It is what it is. No sense being sad about it. Here's the good news. Something that makes me really, really, really excited about this long list. I'm really glad that for the next 3 months, we are not all going to have to spend a lot of time and energy litigating our opinions about Hanya Yanagihara because To Paradise did not make the list. I haven't read it. Chelsea from Montana Book Company gave me this because she was curious to see what my opinion of it would be. So maybe someday I'll sit down and try to get to it. I don't have any plans to do that anytime soon right now because I am one of those people who really aggressively did not like A Little Life. I did like Yanagihara's previous book, which was The People in the Trees. But I've been really hesitant about this one because of my experience with A Little Life and some interviews that I've seen with her. So I'm really glad that I won't feel obligated to read it. I'm really glad that we can avoid the discourse because she is a very divisive figure and everybody has an opinion about her and everybody thinks they're right. So it feels like shouting into the wind sometimes to talk about Hanya Yanagihara, and I'm glad that we will be able to avoid that type of conversation as we go through the process of creating a short list and then announce the winner. Well, I say we collectively watch at the process and react to it as I'm doing right here. So those are, I'd say, the three biggest surprises or snubs that did not make the list. Overall, I am pretty pleased with the list. I'm familiar with roughly half of the books. There are some new to me books, and if you know me, you know that I love a book prize long list because it's a tool of discovery. So I'm really excited to pull up the descriptions of the books that I'm not familiar with and talk about them with you, because that's what I'm going to do in a moment. And I'm really excited about some of the books that are on the list. I will say, without the presence of anyone like Hanya Yanagihara, it does feel like this list is not very controversial. There's nothing that we're going to be fighting about. How you react to that really depends on you. If that makes you find the list boring, that's a valid reaction. But if it makes you feel relieved, honestly, I feel a little bit relieved. I would not have wanted Hanya Yanagihara on the list just so we have something to talk about. I like the fact that it's going to be about the books. You could call this a safe list because of that, but I'm really excited about some of the inclusions, and I think some of them seem a little daring. And I'm going to say now, before we get into the full list, that I'm really excited. Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan made the list. It didn't even occur to me that it could have made the list. Part of that is my own bias about novellas. And even though I've talked about how we shouldn't judge novellas, they are valid and can be beautiful. This is now one of my prime examples of that, along with Dennis Johnson's Train Dreams. And even though I kept talking about how this is proof positive that short works of fiction can be beautiful, can be worth your time, it did not occur to me that this could make the long list. So part of that is my own bias about what constitutes literary merit and what is worth rewarding on a list like this. Part of that is that because there is generally a bias against novellas, I didn't think anybody else would take it seriously. I'm glad that was not the case. I really hope it makes the shortlist. I really hope it makes the shortlist. Is it gonna win? I'd be happy if it does. There are some other books on here that I think are really strong contenders. Maybe the length, this is only about 116 pages, the length might hurt it in the end, but I'm really glad that it's on the list right now, and I hope it makes the short list. Let's start talking about some of the facts about this list, and then we'll get into the titles themselves. Highlights on the Booker website, which I will have linked down below as well, are this. This list features the youngest and oldest author ever to be longlisted, 20-year-old Leila Mottley and octogenarian Alan Garner, who will celebrate his 88th birthday on the night of the winner ceremony. No pressure there. At 116 pages, Claire Keegan's Small Things Like These is the shortest book recognized in the prize's history. The shortest to win was Offshore by Penelope Fitzgerald, 1979, at 132 pages. There are 3 debut novelists who made the list: Maddie Mortimer, Leila Mottley, and Selby Wynn Schwartz. Previously shortlisted authors include NoViolet Bulawayo, Karen Joy Fowler, and Graeme Macrae Burnet, and previously longlisted Elizabeth Strout has also been recognized. The majority of books are published by independent publishers, including first-time appearances from Influx Press and Sort of Books. That's pretty cool as well. Let's dive into the books, because I'm really excited to learn about some of these that I'm not familiar with. One of the ones that I was not very familiar with, but which got a lot of buzz when I did my last Friday Reads video, where I didn't do a prediction video, but I asked people what they were looking forward to, and a bunch of people said that they were hoping The Colony by Audrey Magee would make the list. I had not really heard about The Colony, so now I'm only familiar with it because a bunch of people said that they wanted to see it on the list. It is now on the list, and that, of course, immediately made it grab my attention when I saw it here. And I'm excited to find out what it's about, because this is going to be my first experience of what it is. In Audrey Magee's lyrical and brooding fable, 2 outsiders visit a small island off the west coast of Ireland with unforeseen and haunting consequences. Mr. Lloyd has decided to travel the island by boat without engine, the authentic experience. Mr. Masson will also soon be arriving for the summer. Both Englishmen and Frenchmen will strive to encapsulate the truth of this place, one in his paintings, the other with his faithful rendition of its speech, the language he hopes to preserve. But the people who live on this rock, 3 miles wide and half a mile long, have their own views on what is being recorded, what is being taken, and what is given in return. At the end of the summer, as the visitors head home, there will be a reckoning. Sounds really interesting. Definitely sounds like something the Booker would be interested in as well. So I guess not all that surprising that it made the long list. I had not heard of Audrey Magee before. She was not mentioned as one of the debut novelists, so she clearly has some books out there that I'm going to have to catch up on. And this, I'm going to leave this tab open because I am curious. I don't know if this has been released in the United States. I'm going to have to check. And it sounds like something I would like to read. So I'm going to have to seek out a copy of this one. Given the enthusiasm for it in my Friday Reads video, where people were saying what they would like to be on the list, seems like it would have a good shot at making the short list. I'm not going to do a firm prediction on that. Certainly not now. There's so much time left. But seems like this is a good contender, especially now that I've read the plot. That sounds like something the Booker would absolutely be interested in. So I'm going to leave this tab open and circle back when I'm done recording to see where I can find a copy of that book. Now, After Sappho by Selby Wynn Schwartz is one of the titles I had not heard of at all before this long list was announced. So let's see what it's about. A joyous reimagining of the lives of a brilliant group of feminists, saphists, artists, and writers from the past as they battle for control over their lives for liberation and justice. Told in a series of cascading vignettes featuring a multitude of voices, After Sappho hails the female torchbearers of the late 19th and early 20th century. What did we want? To begin with, we wanted what half the population had got just by being born. Sarah Bernhardt, Colette, Eleonora Deuce, Lena Paletti, Josephine Baker, Virginia Woolf. These are just a few of the women sharing the pages of a novel as fierce as it is luminous. Lush and poetic, furious and funny. In After Sappho, Selby Wynn Schwartz has created a work that celebrates the women and trailblazers of the past and also offers hope for our present and our futures. That does sound really interesting. It again sounds very much like something that the Booker Prize would be intrigued by and find appealing. So I can see why it made the list. I think I'm gonna leave this tab open too. I'm gonna try to seek out some reviews of this because it sounds like it could be really interesting, but because it sounds like it's doing so many things, so many different people to portray, and I'm always suspicious when so many different people are portrayed because you want them to be accurate as to who they are, but used in an interesting way. So there are things about this that sound very interesting to me, but there are also some things that make me think it could go off the rails. The fact that it made the Booker longlist is probably a good sign that it stays together, but I am going to look for more information about that one. Next is Glory by NoViolet Bulawayo. This is a book that I was aware of. It was on my maybe list when I did my most anticipated reads of 2022. I'll put a link to that video in the description box down below if you'd like to check it out. Now, I loved NoViolet Bulawayo's previous book, which was We Need New Names. And you'd think that would mean that I was really looking forward to her next book. The thing that gave me pause was that this is almost like an Animal Farm type thing. We can do the description in a second, but it's like a fable told through animals who represent other things. Obviously, that really works in Animal Farm, but it, again, is something that could be done really well, could go off the rails. And when the book was published, I never really heard all that much feedback about it. This is really the first I'm hearing about it at all since it was published. And I had kind of forgotten about it, being honest. So I was intrigued and wanted to hear more once it was published, and then I didn't hear more and forgot about it until now. So it's going to be interesting to see how the conversation around this book goes now that the long list has been announced and hear more about it. Here's what their description is. This energetic and exhilarating joyride from NoViolet Bulawayo is the story of an uprising told by a vivid chorus of animal voices that help us see our human world more clearly. A long time ago, in a bountiful land not so far away, the animals lived quite happily. Then the colonizers arrived. After nearly 100 years of bloody war of liberation brought new hope to the animals, along with a new leader, a charismatic horse who commanded the sun and ruled and kept on ruling. Glory tells the story of a country trapped in a cycle as old as time, and yet as it unveils the myriad tricks required to uphold the illusion of absolute power, it reminds us that the glory of tyranny only lasts as long as the victims are willing to let it. And again, that sounds really interesting. The fact that it made the Booker long list does make me feel more confident that it's going to be done well. I did, again, really like We Need New Names, which was NoViolet Bulawayo's previous book, so I probably shouldn't have been so hesitant, but now I'm gonna think about this book. Maybe my library has a copy of it. That takes us to Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. Again, so happy this book made the list. Here's what they say about it. Claire Keegan's tender tale of hope and quiet heroism is both a celebration of compassion and a stern rebuke of the sins committed in the name of religion. It is 1985 in an Irish town. During the weeks leading up to Christmas, Bill Furlong, a coal and timber merchant, faces his busiest season. As he does the rounds, he feels the past rising up to meet him and encounters the complicit silences of a small community controlled by the church. Such a good book, 116 pages, but it packs a huge emotional punch. There's a reason so many people have been reading this book since it was released and loving it. I would love to see this book on the shortlist. It's fantastic. I already talked about it a little bit, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it here. I'm just going to say, again, it is fantastic. Nightcrawling by Leila Mottley is a book that I have been intrigued about. It was recently released and sounds amazing. It has been blessed by Oprah, if that means anything to you. And now it has also been blessed by the Booker. It's going to be interesting to see if this makes it to the shortlist. I feel like there are a lot of times a book like this will make the long list and then not make the shortlist, but I'm not super familiar with the Booker. I don't usually follow it all that closely. So let's just do the description. At once agonizing and mesmerizing, Nightcrawling presents a haunting vision of marginalized young people navigating the darkest corners of an adult world. When there is no choice, all you have left to do is walk. Determined to survive in a world that refuses to protect her, a 17-year-old girl finds herself walking the mean streets of Oakland after dark. When she is picked up by the police, the gruesome deal they offer in exchange for her freedom lands her at the center of a media storm and facing a terrible choice. If she agrees to testify, she could help expose the corruption of a police department. But honesty comes at a price, one that could leave her family vulnerable to retaliation and endanger everyone she loves. I've heard really great things about this book. I definitely want to read it. I have not gotten a copy of it yet, but I am really looking forward to reading it. Again, I've just heard great things about it, so I'm not all that surprised to see it on the long list. It will be interesting to see if it makes it to the short list. And we'll have to wait until September 6th to find out if it makes that. Next is another one that I was unfamiliar with. It is Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer. Under attack from within, Leah tries to keep the landscapes of her past, her present, and her body separate, but time and bodies are porous and unpredictable. Something gleeful and malign is moving in Leah's body. It shapeshifts down the banks of her canals, leaks through her tissue, nooks and nodes. It taps her trachea like the bones of a xylophone. It's spreading. Leah's story is told in part by the very thing that's killing her, a malevolent voice that wanders her systems, learning her from the inside out. The novel moves between her past and her present as we come to understand the people that have shaped her life. In turn, each of these take up their place in the battle raging within Leah's body, at the center of which dances the murderous narrator and a boy named Red, the toxic chemo that is Leah's last hope. That sounds really interesting. Again, sounds like it could be really great, but also could go off the rails and not be too good. The fact that it made the Booker long list is probably an indicator that it is good, but this is definitely one that I'm going to hold off on because I was totally unfamiliar with it until this morning. So I'm going to look for some reviews and see what the conversation around this book is like as the long list settles in and everybody talks about it. So I'm going to hold off. It'll be interesting again to see if this one makes it to the short list. It seems like something that might not, given how crowded this field is, but it'll be interesting. So if you have read Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies, let me know in the comment section down below what you thought, because it sounds like it could be really interesting done right. The next one is a book that I only recently learned about and thought about picking up, but I have a very specific reason for why I didn't. Let's talk about it first. It's Case Study, written by Graeme Macrae Burnet. Graeme Macrae Burnet offers a dazzlingly inventive and often wickedly humorous meditation on the nature of sanity, identity, and truth itself. I have decided to write down everything that happens because I feel, I suppose, I may be putting myself in danger. London, 1965. An unworldly young woman believes that a charismatic psychotherapist, Collins Braithwaite, has driven her sister to suicide. Intent on confirming her suspicions, she assumes a false identity and presents herself to him as a client, recording her experiences in a series of notebooks. But she soon finds herself drawn into a world in which she can no longer be certain of anything, even her own character. Especially that first paragraph about it being inventive, wickedly humorous, and dealing with the nature of sanity, identity, and truth itself, reminds me of Macrae's previously shortlisted book, His Bloody Project, a historical thriller, which is told through documents relating to the case of Roderick Macrae. So there's like a murder, and I believe the whole book is told through documents, although it looks like it is told narratively. But it's also a play with form. I purchased this book when it came out in paperback, and I have not gotten around to reading it. So when I found out about the existence of Case Study, I was really interested, and the description sounded really good. And then I thought to myself, Greg, it's been years and you haven't gotten to this one. Get to this one first. And now the fact that this is on the Booker long list is making me want to grab a copy of it. But I need to do this first. Or do I? If you've read both of these, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I mean, it's not like this is a sequel to His Bloody Project. It's just that I've had this for years and I haven't gotten around to doing it. Maybe this is the thing that's going to give me the inspiration to do it. I am really interested in that book. Out of guilt, I feel like I should do the previous book first, if that makes any sense. Let's go to the next one, which is Treacle Walker by Alan Garner. He is the one who's going to be celebrating his 88th birthday on the night the prize is announced, which is going to be really awkward if he does not win, and could be even more awkward if he doesn't make the shortlist. Or I guess maybe they'll avoid awkwardness if he does not make the shortlist. We'll see what happens. This latest fiction from a remarkable and enduring talent brilliantly illuminates an introspective young mind trying to make sense of the world around him. Joe Kopic squints at the world with his lazy eye. He reads his comics, collects birds' eggs, and treasures his marbles, particularly his prized daubers. When Treacle Walker appears off the moor one day, a wanderer, a healer, an unlikely friendship is forged, and the young boy is introduced to a world he could never have imagined. In this playful, moving, and evocative fable, set once again in his beloved Cheshire, the masterly Alan Garner delivers both a stunning fusion of myth and folklore and a profound exploration of the fluidity of time. It sounds really interesting, but there are definitely other books on here that I would gravitate to first, which means I'm not going to be surprised if this makes the shortlist, but it feels like it's one of those books that could go either way. But part of that is my own bias because, as I said, there are other books that I'm gravitating toward first. Let me know what you think. I've never read an Alan Garner book, so let me know what you think of his work, of this book, if you've read it, in the comment section down below. I would be really curious to hear all of that. All right, we have 5 more. The next one is something I was really excited to see on the list. It's The Trees by Percival Everett, which I had thought could be a spoiler for the Pulitzer Prize this year, something that had kind of flown under the radar and then snuck in to win. Obviously, that did not happen. It was not even a finalist. It does feel, though, that since Percival Everett was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize last year, not for this book, for a different one, his reputation has really been growing quickly. And he has very quickly established himself, after years of work, as a legitimate force in the publishing world. And I think he is a very interesting force because he is very different and sort of unapologetically so. And I'm a little surprised to see this on the Booker long list because this very specifically grapples with American issues of racism and crimes related to race and things like that. So I think that really goes to show how much Percival Everett's reputation has grown over the last year and a half, that he has now entered the world stage. And I am a little surprised that it made the long list, but I'm very pleased on his behalf. I'm really looking forward to reading this book. Let's see what they say about it. A violent history refuses to be buried in Percival Everett's striking novel, which combines an unnerving murder mystery with a powerful condemnation of racism and police violence. Something strange is afoot in Money, Mississippi. A series of brutal murders are eerily linked by the presence at each crime scene of a second dead body, that of a man that resembles Emmett Till, a young black boy lynched in the same town 65 years before. The investigating detectives soon discover that uncannily similar murders are taking place all over the country. As the bodies pile up, the detectives seek answers from a local root doctor who has been documenting every lynching in the country for years. So it's a little bit playful, it's a lot dark, and I think the tone of the book might put off certain people in the United States, because I saw an interview with Percival, or listened to an interview with Percival Everett, and someone asked him if he was worried about making white readers uncomfortable in his books, and he, without even hesitating, said no. I applaud that, personally, But there are a lot of people in the United States in particular who might not appreciate that. So maybe it's good that an international award is now picking up this thread and championing this book. I would really like to read it. And if you have read it, I would love to hear what you thought of it in the comment section down below. Really looking forward to getting to that book. The next one is Trust by Hernan Diaz. This is something I've heard a lot of really good things about. So I am going to be excited to learn more about what it's about. A literary puzzle about money, power, and intimacy, Trust challenges the myths shrouding wealth and the fictions that often pass for history. Already interested. He is a legendary Wall Street tycoon. She is the daughter of eccentric aristocrats. Together they have risen to the very top, but at what cost have they acquired their immense fortune? This is the mystery at the center of Bonds, a successful 1938 novel that all New York seems to have read, but there are other versions of this tale of privilege and deceit. Trust elegantly draws these competing narratives into conversation with each other, and in tension with the perspective of one woman bent on disentangling fact from fiction. The result is a provocative and propulsive novel that spans an entire century and becomes more exhilarating with each new revelation. That sounds really interesting. I could definitely be lured into reading that. Haven't heard much about it. I know some people brought it up when I was doing my Pulitzer Prize predictions for this year, but I hadn't heard too much about it. And it seemed like it flew under the radar for the most part. So I'm glad that it made the long list. It sounds really interesting. I'm going to leave this tab open as well, because I think I'm going to check the library to see if they have a copy of Trust by Hernan Diaz. There are 3 books left to go. The next one is The 7 Moons of Maali, Almeida, written by Shehan Karunatilaka. I hope I pronounced that correctly, all of it. Shehan Karunatilaka's rip-roaring epic is a searing, mordantly funny satire set amid the murderous mayhem of a Sri Lanka beset by civil war. Well, that's timely. Colombo, 1990. Maali Almeida, war photographer, gambler, and closet queen, has woken up dead in what seems like a celestial visa office. His dismembered body is sinking in the Beira Lake, and he has no idea who killed him. At a time when scores are settled by death squads, suicide bombers, and hired goons, the list of suspects is depressingly long. But even in the afterlife, time is running out for Maali. He has 7 moons to try and contact the man and woman he loves most and lead them to a hidden cache of photos that will rock Sri Lanka. Again, sounds like it could really go off the rails, but sounds really interesting. And Closet Queen, of course, that immediately grabbed my attention. So I'm going to leave this tab open and look into this book some more. If you have feedback on it, please let me know, because that sounds fascinating in a lot of ways, but I don't know if I'm going to run out and try to get it. The next one is O. William by Elizabeth Strout. Best-selling author Elizabeth Strout returns to her beloved heroine Lucy Barton in a luminous novel about love, loss, and the family secrets that can erupt and bewilder us at any time. Lucy Barton is a successful writer living in New York, navigating the second half of her life as a recent widow and parent to 2 adult daughters. A surprise encounter leads her to reconnect with William, her first husband, and longtime on-again, off-again friend and confidant. Recalling their college years, the birth of their daughters, the painful dissolution of their marriage, and the lives they built with other people, Strout weaves a portrait stunning in its subtlety of a tender, complex, decades-long partnership. Elizabeth Strout is not an unknown author. She won a Pulitzer Prize for Olive Kitteridge over a decade ago, coming up on 15 years probably, if not already. So she's definitely a known quantity. She has been rewarded before. It mentioned that she had been longlisted for the Booker Prize before. It's not like she is unrecognized, but I do feel as though people have recently been discovering her work and appreciating it at a much deeper and more profound and more popular level. I read Olive Kitteridge after it won the Pulitzer Prize, and I remember liking but not loving it. I do definitely want to reread it. But one of the things I really want to do, and especially since I watched a video of Matthew Sharapis where he read every Elizabeth Strout book, is try the Lucy Barton books. So my barrier for entry on this book, and I talked about this in my maybe list of books that are coming out later this year, because there's another Lucy Barton book coming out, and I want to read it. It sounds interesting, but I feel like I need to do I Am Lucy Barton first. And I was texting with Matthew Sharapa this morning about the Booker, And he said you probably can skip the second Lucy Barton book, but would be good to read I Am Lucy Barton. So I feel like I need to do I Am Lucy Barton, and then I can do a William, and then I'll be able to do the one that's still coming out. I really want to explore her work further because I just hear really great things about her. It definitely feels like she is an author who is not underappreciated, because as I said, she's already won a Pulitzer, but it feels like she's only really now becoming widely regarded as a great writer, and that is something that is really good to see because she's been putting in the work for a long time. So it's nice to see her becoming recognized. A book that really surprised me by making this list is Booth by Karen Joy Fowler. Now, I shouldn't be too surprised because Karen Joy Fowler has been at least longlisted. I can't remember what it said, if she was shortlisted or longlisted before. Previously shortlisted authors include Karen Joy Fowler. So she's been up for this before. But I feel like her previous book, I think it was We Are All Beside Ourselves, something like that, was much more popularly regarded. Booth, I've heard some mixed things about. It sounds intriguing. I would definitely read it. Abby from Montana Book Company is a fan of it. It's on her staff picks shelf. So I feel like I would definitely give it a shot. But I've also heard some people who didn't enjoy it much. And it is about the family of John Wilkes Booth. Let's do the description. Karen Joy Fowler's epic novel about an ill-fated family of thespians, drinkers, and dreamers whose most infamous son is destined to commit a terrible and violent act. Junius is the Booth patriarch, a celebrated Shakespearean actor who fled bigamy charges in England. He is both a mesmerizing talent and a man of terrifying instability. As his children grow up in a remote farmstead in 1830s rural Baltimore, the country draws ever closer to the boiling point of civil war. Of the 6 Booth siblings who survive to adulthood, each has their own dreams they must fight to realize, but it is Johnny who makes the shocking decision that will change the course of history. It sounds really interesting. The Booth family is fascinating. If you don't know anything about them, I learned a little bit more about them from a book called Assassination Vacation by Sarah Vowell, in which it talks about a statue of John Wilkes Booth's brother, who was an actor in New York City. And it's a fascinating family. So that is part of the appeal of this book. I've heard some mixed things about how they are portrayed. So I would be interested in trying it myself at some point and seeing what I think. That is the Booker 13, the 13 books that are longlisted for this year's Booker Prize 2022. Again, overall, I feel like there's nothing that's really controversial in here, although there are some books that are determined to be conversation starters for conversations that need to be started, like The Trees by Percival Everett, conversations that have been festering underneath the surface for a really long time. And there are some books that talk about conversations that have also been going on for a long time and are very necessary as well. So it's not that this list lacks controversy. I think it's a very good grouping of books. I'm interested in pretty much all of them. Let me look at the overall list. So I'd say I definitely want to do The Trees, for sure. That is something I would love to see make it onto the short list. And then small things like these, I would also love to see on the short list. That non-negotiable. I'd love to see that happen, especially now that it's broken through and made the long list. Now that I know it's possible, I want to see it go all the way. Nightcrawling, I would love to see on the short list. And then, I feel like, oh, William, I love that Elizabeth Strout is getting recognized, but it feels hard to recognize something later in a series, and maybe that's not fair. I'm going to tentatively think about whether or not I would like to add it to this. I think Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies sounded really fascinating. Case Study sounds fascinating. Trust, I would say I would love to see on the shortlist. The Colony, and I have space for one more. Treacle Walker sounded like it could be really interesting. I'm just going to say, oh, William, because honestly, I love that Elizabeth Strout has built such a reputation for herself and is being recognized. So, quick gut reaction, I'm going to say those are the 6 that I would like to see advance, but I look forward to hearing more about these books, especially the ones that were really new to me, and especially some of the ones that I was questioning just a little bit. And I look forward to seeing which of them make the short list. This is such a good list that I don't think there's any one book that I can point to and say, if that doesn't make the short list, it's over. You know what I mean? I think there's a case to be made for everything on this list, or so it seems right now. I'm gonna have to get to know some of them a little more. But let me know what you think of this list. And we will look forward to September 6th when they will be announcing the shortlist, and then October 17th when they will be announcing the winner. Really excited that we're back into Booker season. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.